Get rid of those guys. Figured out how to do that after last time. Okay, so I'm here tonight to talk to you about weird and wonderful bird nests. And as I say, I volunteer with both Rocky Point Bird Observatory and the Victoria Natural History Society. So before we get into the really weird things, we need to have some terminology here of different styles of nests. The ones that we usually think of when we think about bird nests are the cup nests. So they're shaped like you might imagine, like a cup, so an open cup. And birds that are typical birds that we think of that have nests like that include the hummingbirds, robins, and other thrushes. And these are blackbirds on the right-hand side here. Here's a rufous hummingbird nest that I had in my yard a few years back. And you can see here the size of, when you think about this, the size of the egg is about the size of a Tic Tac, one of those little mints. And here is a baby hummingbird that is just hatched. And you can see it's not much bigger than the Tic Tac because it was all rolled up inside an egg just like that. The baby hummingbirds, usually two to a nest, will hatch out usually in the same day. And that's true of most cup nesters. Now, you'll also notice that hummingbird bill does not really look much like hummingbird bill. You can't put a long bill in a teeny tiny egg. So it has to start out small, and then it starts to stretch out and get a little bit longer. So these are just about ready to fledge. You can see their bills have grown considerably larger as they have. And that wonderful little cup nest that they're in, made out of spider webs and lichens, has stretched to accommodate their little bodies. Probably the cup nest most people are most familiar with is the American robin nest with the robin's egg blue eggs. Ground nests are often cup nests as well. They may be cups in shape, but they are built on the ground. And I know when I became a birder, I was surprised how many of our birds actually nest on the ground. We kind of think it makes sense for some of the sparrows that spend a lot of time on the ground, like these juncos, but there are other birds that nest on the ground as well, including birds like the spotted towhee. Believe it or not, some of our warblers, orange-crowned warblers, nest on the ground. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, why would you do that? It's not very smart. This makes you very vulnerable to animals walking through or our pets, like our dogs and our cats. And this is one of the things that we try to do a fair amount of education with people about, is to say that, yeah, these nests and a lot of baby birds are on the ground. And so even a dog running through the forest, which may seem like an okay thing to do for your dog, is not necessarily a good thing for these nests on the ground during the breeding season. So, it's not such a big deal in the fall, but it is this time of year. And so part of what both organizations I volunteer with are doing is trying to educate people on how to be responsible in your interactions with nature, and particularly with your pets' interactions with nature. This is a great nest. These are red-necked phalaropes, and a lot of eggs have these kind of spots on them. And the spots are created by broken down blood cells. That's what helps give the coloring. Phalaropes are a type of shorebird that we usually see here in migration. They nest up in the north, in the Arctic. And what's really interesting about them, if you look at this picture of them on the lower left here, you'll see one is more colorful than the other. Which one is the male? That's what they want you to think. But that's not the case. In phalaropes, it's the male that sits on the nest and tends to the eggs. The female lays them, of course, but then she leaves the nest and the male takes care of the eggs and the young. So she's colorful and he's the plain one. The one that sits the most on the nest when you have these sexually dimorphic birds is going to be the one that is going to be more plain. Hanging nest. Now, you've possibly seen one around here. Looks kind of like an old tube sock in a bush, and it is the nest of the bush tit. Look how tiny this bush tit is compared to the size of the nest. This is an amazing nest made by two, usually, bush tits, and they make it out of spider webs, moss, lichens, string, tarp shreds, little cellophane tack strips off of cigarette packages, horse hair, anything that they can find. But the critical feature in here is like with the hummingbird, is the spider web, because it creates a stretchy nest. Inside, they line it with plant down. So things like from cattail and cottonwood, other fluffy things that creates an insulating layer. And so the nest, the inside of the nest may be 4 degrees warmer than the outside air. And it allows these little teeny tiny birds to raise up to 10 young in one nest. If it was all about getting the bird on the eggs, you couldn't get that happening in a bush tit nest. As the babies grow, the nest will go from being long like this to being quite round. This is an oriole nest, and this is a rare bird for Victoria, but comes every year. There's usually a few of them around every year. So it's another hanging nest. You can see both of these birds have the opening to their nest at the top of their nest. Not so with some of these. This is a bird from Trinidad and the tropics called the crested oripendula. I saw these in my first year of birding. I went to Trinidad on my way home business thing in Venezuela and saw these nests for the first time. This is a colonial nest too, and we'll talk a bit about colonial nests. This is a safety in numbered regime here. If there's all these hanging nests, maybe yours isn't the one that's going to get predated, right? So they do tend to group together. But the opening in these nests isn't up at the very top, but about halfway down. Other birds that nest in holes are called cavity nesters. And you can see a number of different kinds of cavities here. First of all, a tree with several cavities, probably not even all the same species of birds. Little woodpecker looking out the hole in the center there, and then a human constructed cavity, a nest box with a little black or chestnut back chickadee poking its head out of it. The pileated woodpecker is a cavity nester too. Now, what's interesting about these guys, if you're looking at them here, the adult bird outside the nest is a male pileated woodpecker. You can tell he's male because his crest goes all the way down to his bill, and he has a red mustache. Now, with that information, what are the sexes of the two babies that are sticking their heads out the door there? One of each. So you'll notice the lower one has red in the mustache, and the red of the crest comes all the way down to the bill, whereas the other one, the red only comes down to about the eye, and she doesn't have any red in her mustache. They're pretty big babies at this stage. They will leave the nest like most of our songbirds and near songbirds that we have, being the same size or slightly bigger than their parents. So when people say, well, I saw a small robin, if it was smaller than the robins, it's not likely that it was a robin. It's probably something else. Most songbirds will be adult sized when they come out. They can look a little bit bigger because their feathers are looser. They grow faster because the parents are stuffing food in their mouths. And so their feathers are quite loose. And so they can have a slightly larger appearance than the parents. This is a chestnut back chickadee in a more or less natural cavity. That looks almost like it's a telephone pole or a fence post. It has something in its mouth there. What is that? I know there's some people in this room that know. It's not a caterpillar. And notice it's taking it out of the nest, not into the nest. It's putting out the baby's poop. That's what it is. It's a fecal sac. If you live in a cavity and you're feeding the babies a lot, they're going to be pooping a lot. And you don't want that to be in the nest If it's in a cup nest, the babies tend to back up to the edge of the nest and shoot it out. But inside a cavity, they can't do that. So the parents have to clean this up. Fortunately, the poop comes out in essentially little water balloons, which the parents will carry out, find your car, and drop it. Not all cavities are in wood. These are barn owls in a natural cavity, which brings up this interesting question. Before there were barns, there were still these owls. So what would we have called them before barns? Now, one thing to notice here is that they're not all the same size. Even though this is a family, they're not all the same size. In the owls, they will start brooding on the eggs as soon as they lay the first one. In something like a robin, they don't start doing that until they have all their clutch laid. And the ones that start brooding once the clutch is laid, all of them hatch within 24 hours usually. But the ones that start brooding right away, you're going to have up to 2 weeks difference between the young ones and the older ones. This is an insurance policy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Well, maybe I'll talk about it now. So the insurance policy for that is that if food is scarce, guess who's not going to survive? Guess who's coming for dinner? Another cavity nester that we have around here in small numbers mainly because of a recovery program in Duncan is the western bluebird. And this is where they used to nest, was in natural cavities around the region. But a lot of those natural cavities now are taken up by invasive species like starlings. And so for the population of western bluebirds was pretty much extirpated from Vancouver Island about 30 years ago. They will adapt, though, to nest boxes. And if you can get a population going, they will breed here. Of course, it's very difficult because house sparrows are another species that will get in the way of them and take over their nests, even if there are young in them. And house sparrows are quite ferocious that way. They will actually kill the young and even the adults in the nest if they get the opportunity. How about some of the owls? This is a northern saw-whet owl, and they are cavity nesters too. Unlike some birds, some cavity nesters, female northern saw-whet owls won't let the males in the nest while they're with the young, while the females are with the young. They'll just chase them out. All the male can do is come and bring food, and lots of it, and keep bringing food, and more, because as the babies grow, they need a lot of food. She will eventually leave the nest before the babies have fledged and go and find herself perhaps another partner and start a new nest. And then he's allowed to interact more with the babies and feed them until they actually fledge. We talked a bit about the colonial nest. Here's some birds that like to nest with lots of other birds. You can hardly call this a nest. Common murres like to nest on rocky ledges. You can imagine that this is a bit of a dangerous thing. Eggs can easily fall off, chicks can fall off, and there's generally hundreds, if not thousands, of these families on the same rock. So it does tend to bring predators to those rocks to seek the eggs. They do, as you can see here, face in, right, between the sea and the rock to help keep those eggs on the ledges. I was really shocked to find out that great blue herons nested in trees. I would have thought they would have nested on the ground, but they don't. They nest in trees. There's an interloper in this little group here, though. Can you spot the one that is not like the other? On the right, there is a double-crested cormorant. They also nest in trees. Not always. They will nest up on rocks as well. But if they can get in with a colony of herons like this, then they have the protection of the herons as well. Now, heron populations have declined quite a bit, and part of that is due to the recovery of birds like bald eagles that were nearly decimated by DDT back in the 50s and the 60s. As the eagles have been coming back, they will take a heron These birds look huge. They're 4 feet tall. They're like this big, but they are really just a chicken with long legs and a long neck, right? They weigh about 4.5 pounds, right? They're not that big. They're big, but they're not so big that an eagle can't take it. So eagles can really decimate these colonies. They'll take the eggs, they'll take the young, they'll even take the adults. The great blue herons all got together and talked about this and came up with a plan. And so what they've been finding lately is that great blue herons are building their colonies now very near to an eagle nest. And you're all going, why would they do that? Anyone think of why that's a good idea? Well, eagles are very territorial. So they will chase off all the other eagles that come anywhere near that area. So the heronry only has to contend with one family instead of all the eagles from around the area. So they actually end up with less predation by nesting right near an eagle nest than by nesting away from an eagle nest. They're not bird brains. Cliff swallows build these little mud nests on the side of walls. They cliffs generally, and human-made cliffs too, like bridges. They'll nest there as well. Look at the work. They're like barn swallows in that they build these mud nests. But unlike barn swallows, which have a cup nest, these guys have essentially a cavity nest. They build their own. So they look like a gourd. You can see some of the ones at the top have been completed and they've just got a little hole going in. These nests take about 1,200 bricks. That's 1,200 mouthfuls of mud to make this nest. That's a lot of work for a couple little birds. So you can see some of these nests are not nearly complete, and it might take longer than a year for them to complete them. They will come back and use the same nest again. Swallows and other aerial insectivores are in a lot of trouble these days. First of all, the population of insects has been deliberately going down. We've done a great job of killing off insects, creating wetlands, using things to spray to remove caterpillars and other things from the system. And so the food supply is diminished. But the other thing is when these birds put these on a human-made structure, like a building or a bridge, guess what happens? The maintenance crews come in with power hoses, power washers, and wash them down. That means that the next year when these birds come back, they will have to rebuild them again, right, from scratch. And it takes so much energy that it has an effect on the productivity of these species. Well, how about this for a colonial nester? This is a king penguin colony on South Georgia Island, and I took this picture. It was quite amazing to be there amongst so many penguins. They go all the way up into the hills. And even though they nest together, they don't like each other much. And they're quite fussy about their territory. They don't have much territory. They don't even have a nest. They put the egg on their feet, right? That's the end of their nest. And they stand in the mud and they keep the egg out of the mud. But imagine if you are one of the penguins way up the top there, you have to run the gauntlet through this colony of penguins. And like I say, they don't like each other, but if they get close to another penguin, that penguin that's on territory will slap this with. So it really is like running a gauntlet. They do this flappy thing where they will hit, and the penguins are so close together, they're just out of flipper range. So anyone going, excuse me, trying to work their way through is likely to get slapped hundreds, if not thousands of times on the way back to where their mate is with the egg on his or her feet. Another kind of nest that we don't really think of for most of our birds are these burrow nests. Now, of course, for the burrowing owl, you think about a burrowing nest, right? So they do live in tunnels. They can construct the tunnels, but generally they start with an existing tunnel. So they would prefer to find a gopher hole or a prairie dog hole and then start from there. How many burrowing owls in that picture? There are two. How about this? Would you have thought that a seabird like a rhinoceros auklet also has burrows underneath all these tussocks? Are holes, and inside those holes are rhinoceros auklet. And they're just about an arm's length in, right? The researchers have to get down on their bellies and reach in to feel for the eggs or the chicks in here. So the most of these that you can find in any one place around here is Triangle Island, which actually has the largest rhinoceros auklet colony in the world. And that's off the north end of Vancouver Island. That horn that gives them their name, that makes them a rhinoceros auklet, falls off every year. Both males and females get it, but it's like a fingernail and it just falls off. How about burrowing penguins? You know about burrowing owls, but there are also penguins that nest in burrows under the ground. And this is in the Falkland Islands, a Magellanic penguin nesting cavity under the ground. You have to be careful where you walk there for all the tunnels. Kingfishers nest in burrows? Yes, they do. So they will build a hole, a cavity, into the side of a bank. And bank, we're going to use the word loosely. It can be like a river bank or a cliff along the sea. Or I found, not this one, but I found a kingfisher nest in a building lot where they had excavated for the basement. And just that cliff that was only about this high had a kingfisher nest in it. And what they do is they pull the sand out as far as your arm and then with a dog leg. Right? So you can't see the nest, it's around the corner. So if you look in the hole, you won't see anything. But they will excavate even in fairly low cliffs, man-made or natural. Northern rough-winged swallows will take advantage of those holes and sometimes excavate their own. And so this is one that was either created by a kingfisher or that water may have caused the hole. So they're looking for burrows themselves. If they can get an advantage by finding one that's already made, then they will use that. Platform nests. The ones that we think of most as platform nests around here are really the osprey. You'll find a number of them on these light standards, like at soccer fields and such, or other man-made towers. Some of them not all that high, but man-made structures. A study was done that found that ospreys were actually more successful on man-made structures than they were on natural structures. Do you think of a reason that might be? They're stronger, that is one. One of the other reasons is that, sorry? Not, that's a good guess, that they're heated, not necessarily. In fact, if it gets too hot, those things go up in flames. So you don't really want that to happen. But they can see the predators better. If a weasel or a raccoon is coming up a tree, it's got some cover, right? But if it's coming up a tower with a light on the top of it, the osprey can see it much sooner and chase it off. So there's less predation on these structures than there are on natural structures. And of course, eagles. They will use the same nest year after year, sometimes having two nests that they'll alternate before because they can get pretty lousy with bugs and parasites. So and lice, which is why I said lousy. So they actually will get bird parasites, avian parasites in them. So sometimes giving them a year's rest will clear some of those parasites out. So they use their vacation home for a year and then will often come back. The nests can get huge. Look at that one in the lower corner there. They can weigh up to a ton. You do not want to be under an eagle nest when it comes out of a tree. Okay, those were just the ordinary nests. Now we're getting on to some spectacular nests. So looking for a way to defend your nest against predators or insects or other problems, you can use natural made material. And here an elf owl from the deserts of North America has its in a break in a saguaro cactus. The predator would have to scale all those spines to be able to get to it. So it's a great spot to have a nest. Marsh wrens have no hens, and they build the most spectacular little nest. And I have a special thing here for people that are here tonight in person. I brought a marsh wren nest with me. And so you can pass this along if you hold it by the Russian. Have a look at the weaving done on this. This is a nest with a roof. It's lined with plant down. You can see in that little hole that it has plant down in it. The female puts the plant down in. The male, this little guy, will build up to 3, sometimes 4 nests for the female to choose from. And she indicates which one she likes best by lining it with plant down. So with no hands, he has to weave this fantastic basket with a roof for his potential mate to pick from. Another nest with a roof is the magpie nest. Now, it's not as soft and delicate as the marsh wren nest, a lot bigger, but isn't that interesting that some birds have decided that having a roof is a good idea for their nest? These guys build their nest out of mud, and they're all pillared. So they stand about this high. So they put mud together to create a pillar and put the nest on the top of it. And that way, when it rains, the water will run around the nest and out to the sea and not wash any of their eggs or nests away. Though, just so you know, all that weight will need more on the top. They figured that there were 350,000 pairs in this colony. Yeah, that's Falkland Island. Steeple Jason. Here's what I found at Fort Rod Hill last year. You can see that this is not very high. This is a tree that was cut off, and this Canada goose decided that, yeah, that makes a good nest. The hole's near the top. The hole is near the top. You can find it there. Even put your finger in it if you want. No, she gets in at the top of that marsh wren nest. The mallee fowl in Asia is an interesting situation. This is its nest here. It's huge, and it's made out of dirt. Made out of dirt. This is the male on the nest. So the female does not tend to it at all. She lays the eggs, and the male will put soil and sand on it to keep it out of the sun, to lower the temperature, or take it off so that the sun can warm them up. So he does the thermal regulation by moving sand around. And that's a big nest. When the babies come out, they just come out and go on their own. Nobody takes care of them at that point. In the mallee fowl, I don't know, but it's not an exceptional number. It's probably like a fowl will sometimes have, more than a dozen, but it's not like it. I mean, the nest is that big to provide insulating quality, not because he has 175 eggs in it. The southern yellow hornbill finds a nice cavity, entices a mate into it, and then walls it up. She is inside there until the work is done. He can't get out, the babies can't get out, and nobody can get at them. He comes and brings food and drops it into that little slot for her and the babies to eat till it's done. They eventually break the mud out. And the adult, they can break through. They just don't. It's a great way to prevent predation. Killdeer have a nickname that I just love. It's called parking lot plover. They will put their eggs on gravel, just like this. Very easy to not see them. So these are non-nest nests coming up in this section. They just put them always in a little group like this of four with the pointy ends together. But they'll put them anywhere. They'll put them on a rooftop. They'll put them on a pathway. I think my favorite worst killdeer nest was under a faucet in a park. You know how they usually have a ring with some gravel in it so that water will drain away and not form a big puddle? Right there, right under the tap. But it's not just the killdeer. Look at these tern eggs out on the sand on the beach. In the US, they still allow people to drive on a lot of the beaches. And you can imagine that these eggs are very vulnerable to four-wheel drive vehicles racing up and down the beaches. Often, too, they will put them right in a rut because that gives a bit of protection. And then other people come along and see where other people have driven and they drive the same paths. And so the eggs don't make it. Here, closer to home, we have marbled murrelet that really don't build much of a nest either. And what's really amazing about these guys is that they can be 50 kilometers away from the ocean. They fly in every night to this nest. Right? Most of them are closer than that, but most of them are about 15, lost me. When they took my other mic away. Okay, I'm just pausing here because the microphone batteries died and I'm going to try and hook up the other mic. I do not, I think the cable went away. So I'm just going to have to talk really, really loud. Okay, you might want to move a little closer because I don't have a microphone that works right now. And my IT guy or AV guy just left. Okay, marbled murrelets put their eggs up on these mossy branches and will go out to sea every day, come back every night with food for the babies once they've hatched. White fairy terns, even less. There's not even any moss there. They just find a little dip in a branch and we'll put them in there. This is about to be your new favorite bird. This is the whiskered tree swift. This is the nest. So that it's like the bird got a piece of chewing gum and put it on the branch and stuck its egg to the chewing gum. It's not much of a nest. No, this is a tropical. Brunei, I believe this one. One egg, one chick. Now I've got a little video on here of the transfer of parental responsibility. So watch very carefully. This video is almost 2 minutes long. Watch very carefully and watch for the changing of the guard. Now this one has a little chick underneath it. Did you see the switch? That was pretty fast, wasn't it? Okay. Now I don't know how you guys, if that worked well for you guys out on the Zoom room there, because I may have not had the video optimized. So I'm just going to put that back and go backwards one. And while I change batteries here, or try to, for my microphone, I'm just going to play that one again. Here I am. And we're back. I'm back. That's really fast. Maybe that's why they call them swift. Okay, how about this nest? This is a gyrfalcon nest of Scandinavia. Gyrfalcons up top there. There's nest in the cavity there. They've done some DNA analysis on and carbon analysis on this nest and discovered that it has been used by the same lineage of gyrfalcon for 2,500 years. It's a good nest spot. They're not going to let anyone else have it. Sociable weavers in Africa build these giant grass nests, and the holes are in the bottom. They can get so heavy that they can actually bring down the tree. The edible nest swiftlet, another swiftlet, makes its nest out of saliva. You can see the egg right here. And that's when you order bird nest soup, that's what you are getting. You are actually getting swift spit. Okay, that doesn't sound too appetizing, does it? But enough people want to have bird nest soup that it has actually been a threat to the species and has moved them into being an at-risk species. This is a snowy seaspill. This is from the Southern Ocean, where there are no trees. So when there are no trees, where do you get sticks like these? Any thoughts? Someone said the shore. No, these are actually the feather shafts and bones of other birds. Okay, sometimes there's a surprise in a nest. And this is a bit of a surprise. This is an eastern screech owl and a wood duckling. Wood ducks and mergansers often will lay their eggs in the nest of their birds. Yes, like cuckoos. And so in this case, it is believed that the duck laid its egg in the owl nest. And the owl brooded it, and it hatched. And of course, ducklings are ready to go, right? They're precocious. And so they are ready to go. And so the duckling could hear ducks in the nearby pond. And so jumped up into the opening of the nest box, jumped out and ran off. The owl wondering what the heck. Now, I wondered if this was a fairly common occurrence. So I actually researched it and found out that there was one other occasion that this had been noted. And in fact, the owl had started by laying some eggs. The wood duck came in and put her eggs in there and destroyed the owl, took the owl eggs out, right? So the owl sat and actually incubated ducklings. What about this one? If you have been in Victoria a while, you may have heard of this one. probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. This is a nest out in North Sanet. It is an eagle nest, and there were three young bald eagles here. But that's not a bald eagle. So in this nest of three eaglets, there was also a young red-tailed hawk. This red-tailed hawk was invited for dinner, but not as a guest, along with a sibling. The sibling fulfilled what it was brought there for, which was food for the eaglets, but this one managed to persuade the parents to feed it instead of eating it. And so it managed to survive, and it grew to an age where it fledged, flew around the nest, came home every night for salmon dinner, and until the eaglets left as well. This has happened more than once. However, the youngster usually does not survive. Even if it's there for a week, eventually the eagles decide to use it for food. So this may be the only record where it actually got to fledging and did survive. And what about human materials in nests? This is a bowerbird. Bowerbirds, the males impress the female by collecting colorful objects. A lot of those colorful objects are garbage. They will also collect natural objects like berries and flowers, but this particular bowerbird likes blue, or he thinks his females will like blue. And the blue that he was finding is from water bottles and juice box straws. Oh, now is this a good idea? Don't they know that cigarettes can be hazardous to your health? There is a good reason for them to do this. The nicotine in the cigarette butt will act as an insect repellent, right? Or killer, right? So that it will get rid of things like the lice and the mites that might be in the nest. But a lot of people don't put out their cigarette when they throw them on the ground. And so every year there's a story like this. That's a question was how would they know about how the cigarettes might be useful? I don't know how they know that, but they also use beetles for the same purposes in some of their nests. They'll go get beetles and do the same thing. So this is a gallinule on a Canada goose decoy, a floating nest. Maybe it won't, maybe no one will notice me here. Well, this is a Buick's wren feeding babies inside a shoe that is stapled to the tree or nailed to the tree. Now this was obviously nailed to the tree to serve as a nest cavity, and it worked. Hummingbirds seem to like porches. They figured out that they would like a roof too, but rather than building a roof, they'll take advantage of the roofs we put up. So if there's something like a string of lights or a wind chime, you may find that the hummingbirds will put their nest on top of those. And this is not the only picture I found like that. This one was, I thought, especially appropriate. Look at what the spinner is. Mourning doves and other pigeons are really bad nest builders. And sometimes they'll just find a couple of sticks and put them somewhere. Or I look at this one, I see that tree above it. My guess in the reflection, I think it probably put it in the tree and it just fell onto the car. And so they put the nest right there. Oh yeah? I saw a crow's nest in there, but a pigeon would do that as well. Yeah. How about this? Double occupancy. We have a chickadee in the cavity nest and a robin with its nest right on top of it. More human-made tunnels. These are violet green swallows. Northern rough-winged swallows will do this as well. We've made the tunnel. They'll just go and nest inside it. And here's some in a mailbox. This is in Europe, I believe. And so they put signs up there so that nobody puts anything else in the mailbox. I have also found nests like in the rural mailboxes where they've got a little door on them, if the door is slightly ajar. you can get a bird building a nest in there. More birds in shoes. Be careful where you put your feet in the spring. Flower pots, especially hanging ones. Around here, during this time of year, about once a week, I get a phone call or an email from someone saying, there's a bird with a nest in my hanging basket or my flower pot by my back door. What should I do? Well, one of the answers is you still need to water that plant, because if you don't, plant's going to die and expose that nest. You just need to water it away from where the nest is. This is an Oregon junco with a little nest full of eggs. Did I mention birds will find whatever they think might be useful? Now, clearly this bird was after the hair on this Barbie doll or Barbie-like doll, but the body came along with it and they were okay with that. They just worked with what they could find. And last but not least, how about this one, the jungle crow in Japan? This nest looks fine where it is, but the problem with these guys is they will also build these nests on power poles. And so they are responsible for a lot of power outages when these metal hangers come in contact with the power line. Not that good for the birds either, I'm guessing. But as you can see from the slides I've shown you here, birds are quite creative, quite innovative, and good at recycling. So I hope you have enjoyed this little walk through weird and wonderful bird nests. Oh, I'm sorry, I take that back. I added a couple of slides tonight. This is the encore. Okay, the encore. These are great horned owls, and this is one that was taken at the Pacific Forestry Center some years ago, where they'd actually put the nest in the flower boxes at Pacific Forestry Center. But right now, there's an even more interesting human nest for great horned owls. A couple of years ago, there was a nest in Leyritz Park that fell down. Owls don't build nests, they use other birds' nests. And so the nest fell down, and the rescuers put it back, but they needed something to contain it. And what they used was a laundry basket. So now, if you search the trails of Leyritz Park, you might find a laundry basket up in a tree with an owl nesting in it. Now that's the end, I think. Yes, there we go. Thanks, everybody. Okay, I'm going to stop my share, and I can see there's 15 comments. Hope they're all not saying we couldn't hear you. I think Yannicka would have said something if that was.
Oh, no, we could hear you very well. And there was just the odd question. One was about California quail. Do they nest on the ground? And I said yes, but do you want to add anything about that? And there's a lot of appreciation.
So they do nest on the ground, as Yannicka said, and they can have fairly substantial broods in that nest. I think even up to 20 sometimes. When they hatch, they're tiny, but they go, right? They can't fly at that point, but they can run like crazy. They can't get over curbs very well though. So sometimes that works to their disadvantage. Okay, well, thank you everybody, and I hope you have a great summer, and that we'll see you back in September. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Anne. That was great.
Thank you so much, Anne. Yes, enjoy your summer.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome, Heather and John.
Thank you, Anne.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thanks, Anne.
Thanks for coming. Wait.